this is weird. They know. They're very intuitive.
Intuitive.
Word.
What do they know, Ellie? What's happening?
What is happening? Today is going to be such a good conversation to have, I think. But before we start, welcome everybody to another episode of Polite as Fuck.
Polite as fuck.
Polite as fuck, everybody, because that's what we're trying to do. That's what we always are.
What we are.
Yeah. I'm trying to do. No, we are. Today we are talking about breakups, specifically healing from breakups. I think this time of the year, well, in my personal experience, my two previous relationships, I've both been broken up with around this time of year. And so I think this is a lot, like we said last episode, of this like New Year's resolution and looking forward to the new year. Everybody's kind of reevaluating their life. And if you are in a relationship, you're taking that time to reevaluate your relationship. And a lot of the time, this is when people feel like they have to stay together or are really contemplating breaking up.
Or getting engaged.
Or or going the other direction.
If you're doing well, cheers to you.
Cheers to you. This episode is for everybody else. No. So I'm excited to share some of the things that we've been looking at for this episode, and then sharing some of our thoughts and feelings around breakup as well, and then maybe touching into kind of how you heal from a breakup and some of the steps that we took and what we recommend.
Yeah. So to start, maybe how long ago was your most recent breakup?
My most recent breakup will be 2 years after Christmas, so hitting that 2-year mark. Yeah, a fair amount of time. But I think we'll get into that later. But yeah, about 2 years.
Yeah, mine was in April. How many months is that?
7?
7? Yeah.
7, 8 months? Yeah.
I would have to count, but we'll just go with 7 or 8. But I wanted to start with that because I feel like it goes into what we're going to speak about, and like there's really no time limit on healing, and I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. But we were doing a lot of research, and I was looking up like the science behind getting your heart broken. And some crazy stats, some crazy things that I read. The first thing is like and this is all from this NPR article that I found. It's a podcast too, I guess. And this person wrote a whole book on the science behind heartbreak because she was with someone when they met when she turned 18. They were together for like 36 years. Wow. And he cheated on her and left her, and they had like 2 kids together and all this stuff. So she was just like her whole adult life she was with this person and just felt like her whole world was falling apart, and she didn't understand like why obviously she did, but like the science behind it. But what she found was that when you're falling in love, so like even in the very beginning of your relationship, your brain actually creates more stress hormones because it's already anticipating for heartbreak.
That's crazy.
I know.
That is like, when you said that to me, it makes sense but doesn't. And is so hard, and I think a lot of people can relate, and that answers your question about maybe why, and we'll get into this too, but why you're feeling the way you're feeling when you're starting a new relationship or starting that dating scene after a relationship, of why you feel that anxiety. And that's so crazy.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to add too, like, your brain on love, with that aside, you have this like feeling of it's just like a flood of dopamine. And that's like, and I see this too, of this like feeling of like motivation and like goal oriented like emotions and feeling. And so that's your brain on love, which is all great. But your brain on heartbreak takes like a complete turn. And I was just when you had said like that stress hormone cortisol, it made me like look that up a little bit more. And some of the things that I found is that cortisol literally goes straight, sometimes will like build up and go straight to your largest muscles. So of course, like my mind, the first thing I thought of is like my quads. And like, after you do like a really hard workout and it's just like all just sitting there, or when coach make us do sprints and stuff, like it just all is sitting there. I know that's lactic acid, that's a little different, But that's just such an interesting visual to think of, like it's all tensed up in your muscles. You're constantly tense. And then because your body is realizing like, okay, this is not right. This amount of cortisol in your large muscle groups
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be there. Where it goes next is your digestive system. So
Mm.
that's like that stomach ache feeling and like
Mm-hmm.
loss of appetite, sometimes diarrhea. I know that's like a gross thing to talk about, but like how you
Yeah.
have this like such horrible like body aches and tummy aches. Um, and I even saw this too. I think they coined it on something on an article or an online website called Greatest of breakup cold, and that's
Mm.
so true of like that feeling of like horribleness in your stomach. And so the fact that there's like science backed up behind it, it's like the way that you're feeling. You're not crazy. It's not crazy. It's literally backed by science of the amount of things that are going on that you maybe can't recognize or place a name to.
Yeah. I think, well, I know humans are social creatures. And as much as like I enjoy being alone, I do things. I lived by myself for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole time I was in a relationship, I lived by myself. But like in general, humans need community. They need that like social interaction
Mm-hmm.
and other things I was reading. And I know this even just growing up with five other women in the house. Like your body starts to regulate, like your cycles start to regulate with
Yeah.
the other people that you're living with. But in like an intimate relationship, when you're in close proximity with each other, your body start to regulate as well. And a crazy thing was that your heartbeat, like when you're sleeping, starts to like be in sync as you're sleeping. And it's so wild because I would get like the best sleep of my life when my partner and I were sleeping together, but it makes sense now because it was like we were just kind of in tune and I feel like relax.
Mm-hmm.
But the science, just learning more about the science behind it. So
Mm-hmm.
when your partner leaves, your body goes into this like fight or flight
Mm-hmm.
mode and your cortisol levels go up and your nervous system, like you're saying, feels like it's under threat and you feel like you're like in attack mode almost, and you're putting up all these lines of defense. And there's this correlation between heartbreak and loneliness, but there's also this correlation between loneliness and like disease and all these things that your body starts to do, like you're talking about, like feeling sick or getting nauseous or what have you, and you can't really control that.
Mm-hmm.
Your body's trying to protect
Yeah.
itself from what you just
Like
went
literally
through.
dying from heartbreak.
Yeah,
And that's a real thing.
I
That's
know,
a
it's
real
so
thing.
sad.
It is so sad. And I think sometimes, like, I'm very blessed with my mindset right now to be able to dive into it. But I can tell you that during this, like, during the first, couple of weeks, months, whatever, I know you just said it's not linear, so it doesn't matter. But in the moment of real pain and intensity, you're not going to be like, oh, well, science, blah, 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 blah. But it's just so important to remember and try to remember as much as you can that as much as you feel so uncomfortable and in so much pain, it's normal. And it's like there's science to back up why you feel the way that you feel.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Yeah.
insane.
I know. And I never felt like I was like crazy, but I was always really hard on myself for like, why am I feeling this way? Like, I wish that I could just shut it
Mm-hmm.
off or like not care so much. But like,
Right.
all these chemicals in your body are telling you otherwise, and
Right.
you can't control that.
Right.
But I do think an important thing, we're planning to talk about this later, but I've been feeling really like I want to be more in tune with my body.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like for that reason, then when you go through these like traumatic events in your life, you are able to tune in more to like what your body needs,
Mm-hmm.
and like if you need rest, if you need to be active, if you need to eat something, like being able to really tell what your body is trying to tell you,
Mm-hmm.
which I feel like has been, heartbreak aside, like something that I've been needing to work on.
Right. Because your whole routine gets thrown off, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're so used to doing things like even say like a workout, you do the same workout. Well, when that breakup happens, you might have to switch up the way that you do things because of the way that your body is reacting to this really traumatic thing that's happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard too because I think even though there is so much science behind it, I think it's worth noting that our like people don't, and what I'm trying to say is like your life, people expect your life to still go on. Like you still have to show up to work. You're still supposed to eat and sleep and show up. If you have kids, you still have to show up for them. If you have animals, you have to show up for them. You know, your job, like it's life around you. The world continues to turn even though your world has stopped. And so being able to navigate how to try to continue even though the world is like spinning so fast around you. And so knowing these things kind of helps to be able to navigate that because it's just so hard.
Yeah. I think to navigate and to be like forgiving and like accepting of like, yeah, this is like happening. And I like not trying to combat or like battle with yourself because you're already so fatigued.
Right.
To be like, yes, this is happening to me. Okay. Here's what I'm going to do. And more so like moving forward than being so conflicted in your own mind of like why you're feeling a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just really important to note the science that's behind it and the way that you're not only your I had just mentioned like your brain on love and your brain on heartbreak, but also your body as well, and what that means and how to be able to recognize it as much as you can in that moment and try to, like you just said, give yourself what you need in that moment, because you may not need to go lift a gazillion weights and do that, but maybe a walk might be able to help as far as that exercise point. And then, you know, if you have no appetite, because that's what your body's telling you, if all that cortisol just shot straight into your gut and you're not being able to eat because you have a massive stomach ache, what is it that you need? Is it soup? You have to treat yourself as if you have a cold or a flu or something very intense. And at the time of my breakup, I did not view it like that. Everyone around me wasn't necessarily saying get over it, but that's how I felt. Like I need to get over it. It's just another day. Like, yeah, this sucks, but get over it. But my body was telling me otherwise. And now in hindsight, I can look back and say like I should have listened more and I didn't understand. So I hope that that kind of sets the tone for like it's a real thing and that your body is going through the change just as much as your mind is. Okay, so moving on from kind of your brain and your body on heartbreak, I found this really great article that I'd like to dive into, and kind of the way that I would, you know, want to move into talking about breakup and healing from a breakup. It's called The 13 Stages of Every Breakup and How to Make Each One Suck Less. And it's from Women's Health Online by Perry Bloomberg and Natalie Mejia. And this is actually published recently, October of this year. So I think that's helpful. I think a lot of other things that I found were a little bit later or earlier, however you want to look at it. But I just like this because it's very real, very new. And so we kind of want to loosely base on this. I don't want to go exactly through the article, but I do want to pull up the points of these 13 stages, because when we had decided that we wanted to talk about breakups, one, I did get a little nervous, and two, the first thing that came to my mind, and maybe that's just like the social worker in me, is the 5 stages of grief. So that's kind of how I wanted to list it. Like that's how I saw it. And so when I saw this, that's what it's like. But I feel like I needed more. And so this had all of the stages that made sense to me. And then when I shared it to you, I think you agreed. So that's kind of how we're going to go about it. And it's just a really great article. If you guys ever want to search it up, I recommend it. It has some really interesting things. Plus, I just like when people talk, or when looking at an article, they write similar to how they talk, because it's very real. I don't want to have to read a research right now. I'm just needing someone to talk to. And so that's what I also liked about this article. And so the first one is ambivalence. And so this feeling of unsure about someone or something. And the first thing, literally, I pulled this article up and the first thing I saw was pro and con list. And I was like, yes, that's me. So before we get too into it, I kind of just want to speak on my breakup a little bit. So not necessarily about the relationship, just the breakup. We were in different countries. So I know that there's a lot between like whether you're broken up with over the phone or in person. So this one was over the phone because there wasn't really any other way. And ambivalence was so strong, and it was strong beforehand, obviously. And the pro and con lists that I had made were like, there were so many. And just this feeling of being so unsure, but also not doing anything about it. And so that's kind of like leading into it. And then when I was broken up with, I don't know how much I want to get into, but there's always that feeling of shittiness when someone breaks up with you over the phone. But there's also that added shittiness of when you are being broken up with and their phone dies and they never call you back. So that was an added
Just a little added
stress.
Yeah.
And I think like one, starting my year like that was not fun. And that's why I don't like resolutions, because it's just not fun. And just this so concrete decision that I felt I had nothing to do with. Now looking back, that's changed. That's changed a little bit, but in the moment, I just remember feeling like, what the fuck just happened? I feel like I've been ghosted, which I was. I feel like my heart's been ripped out, which it was. And now this person who was my person is now like gone. I'm not even able to go see them. They don't even live in this, not, let alone the same city, in the same fucking country. And they're not picking up their fucking phone. So that's just kind of just a real quick insight. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes into it. But, and everything is different when you look back into it. But I just remember feeling so, for lack of a better word, like, what the fuck just happened? And not knowing where to go from here and feeling so lost. And also feeling like, this just like going back to this ambivalence of just being like, I had just made all these pro-con lists, but I wasn't the one that decided. I was making the pro and cons list. I was unsure just as much as I believe that he was, but I didn't make the decision. And me being who I am, that really frustrated me. But I think it's important to note, because I was just like, and just like, anyway, so that's kind of my my intro to my breakup. Can you share yours?
Yeah. When you share this article with me, and the ambivalence piece is the first point, for me, I feel like ambivalence or like uncertainty comes pretty early on in the relationship. Like, you start to actually really get to know that person, and then you're like, do I really want to date them? Actually. And when I compare, I've been in 2 relationships in my life, like 2 serious relationships. One was for almost 5 years and the other was for about 3. And both of them, that uncertainty came pretty early on in the relationship, which is a bummer. But I also feel like I was like, well, these are things we can work through. Like, this is just the process. This is part of getting to know someone. And in my last relationship, we had actually taken a break around the holidays. And this was my choosing, because I was like, I just don't really know. There was a lot going on in the relationship that I just wasn't sure if I could keep up with anymore. Like, I was feeling so drained, and I was like, I just need some time to really decide if this is something I can commit to. And all of these scientific things of like this, all these feelings flooded me when we like stopped talking. We weren't seeing each other. Also being home where like we first met was hard, and just like the holiday season, there were so many things piling up. And so I feel like very quickly I was like, you know what? I want this relationship. I feel like it was more that I wanted those feelings to stop. Like, feeling like so upset, but also like I really loved this person and I wanted to make it work. And so in my mind, I was all in at that point. Like, that ambivalence was gone, because it was like, I made this choice. I'm committing to you. We're going to work on this. We're going to get through these things. And so when the breakup came in like 4 months later, I felt very blindsided, because I had thought that we were both like over that hump of uncertainty, and the way it ended was very like, again, feeling like I had no say, similar to you, of like this person just kind of stopped talking to me. I was like, what is going on? And then ending a relationship over the phone also happened to me, like being dumped over the phone. And we didn't have the excuse of being in separate countries. I was actually in the same city as him, like the day before he did it. So that was just like an extra layer of suck, and not being able to feel like having that closure of like that physical closure of seeing that person one last time. And the conversation was very just like wishy-washy and unclear. And so I felt so uneasy when it ended, and so like this was not any of my doing, which just makes it really hard to move on from, which
Yeah.
I think these next stages kind of go into all the different feeling and phases that you go through.
Yeah. I just, with what you had just said, real quick, it's interesting that you just said that about hearing his, like the conversation being wishy-washy, because looking back on my conversation, I didn't know, like I literally had to Google the word today, ambivalence, because I wasn't sure. I was like, I think I know, but I'm not sure. But I could hear it in him as well. And I think it's just important to note that that's what it was, because I was, like you had just said, is beforehand when you had taken that break, you are in this, talking about your body and what it looks like when you are in heartbreak and when you're dealing with all of these things, you are in this fight or flight mode. And for me, I felt that very way. And then all of a sudden, like I really just was like, oh my gosh, I need to latch on. So I was like all of a sudden latched on, and I thought that I had communicated that with the person that I was with. And then hearing continually over the phone and over these times, like holiday times, through, the holiday and before it had happened, hearing his ambivalence was making me hold on more, because I was like, oh shit, you were feeling how I was feeling a while ago, and I needed you to say, I need you, I need you, I want you, I want you. And now he's saying all of those things. So I'm like, oh shit, I need to say that. And so that added on to that. And then, of course, the breakup.
Yeah.
So that leads us to the second stage, which is euphoric recall. So that is just it's happened, and all of a sudden, the only things that you can think about the relationship were all of the amazing things. And for me, it was, and maybe you can relate to this as well, is all of the even like little good things that happened were like blown up, and all I could remember were just these good things. And I just like this, thinking about that and having this euphoric recall, as she is stated in this article, also leads to this feeling of guilt and regret. And for me, that was so strong. And just for context, I was living in another country. I was living in Australia. We both were. And I had left around the September time of that year for multiple reasons, and one of them being COVID. The Australian borders were about to close, and I needed to make a decision because my visa was up, and I had made the decision to come home. So it was a very big thing that had happened to our relationship and to myself as well. I was living from home for so far away. Anyway, so for me, that feeling of guilt and regret, even though he had made that decision, I kept feeling that guilt of, I left and now I'm guilty, and feeling regret because of that. And then reminding myself of all of these amazing parts of the relationship, all these great aspects, everything that we did. And I am very much a romanticizer. So everything for me in a lot of my relationships have been about like the story. And so I was just so feeling like, oh my God, the story is broken. The story is broken. Like our history is broken. And that's all I could remember. And it was really strong for me. And I just remember like looking through all photos of great times. And like for some reason, like there were a lot of shitty times. All of those left my brain. They didn't exist. And when people would tell me like, well, remember when this happened, or remember when that happened? Because I was literally at my dad's girlfriend's house when we were broken up with. And that was like all of my dad's family and all of my dad's girlfriend's family. And like, obviously I was very upset. And so everybody was trying to help me and saying all these things because I was like, oh my God, everything was so great, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, those didn't happen. Like I was just so could not see the bad at all. Like this
Yeah.
was a very real thing for me.
I feel like I kind of skipped this one in the beginning and went to the third, which is making sense of it all, right? Is that the
Yeah.
third one? Can I skip
Yeah,
to
of course.
that? Okay. Because
No. We must go in my order.
I do, and I think like we kind of alluded to this, like this isn't a linear thing, and you can go in between these phases and come back to them and go forward and skip a few and feel like you're like totally healed, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, we had the best times together. Freaking Snapchat memories. Any memory on the phone when it like just like creates a slideshow of like these good times.
And they have the like little weird ass music that they play in the background of like the piano. I'm like, why are you doing this to me right now? I don't like that.
Okay, cool. On this time last year, we were having a great time. Nice.
Cool, great. Thanks for reminding me.
But I think for me, it was making sense of it all is what came right after the breakup actually happened, because I was just so confused that it just happened. I don't remember exactly what the article said, but for me, it was more so like replaying the last 4 months and like re-navigating, how did this happen? Where did this take a turn? When did we lose? Like, when were we not on the same page anymore? And because the relationship ended over FaceTime, I actually ended up reaching back out to him a few weeks later, maybe like a month in, and was just like, I feel like I deserve a conversation in person, because I couldn't, not that closure is ever really given, or just like sometimes you just don't get that, but I felt like having that conversation in person and really ending in like a loving way is what I needed, because I was like, this just doesn't make sense to me. So luckily, I mean, I don't know. Lucky me, he said yes, and we met in person, but like, it's shitty that he couldn't have given me that to begin with. But I'm glad that I was able to get that, because thinking to my relationship prior that was actually a few years longer than that, we ended when I was in Latin America. And it very much like there was never really any closure. It kind of just like ended without either of us really saying it was over. And then it was kind of like, wait, are we still together? It was so bizarre. So I feel like I skipped some phases in there because there was no like clear line drawn. Whereas with this past relationship, I felt like I really needed that to be able to move on.
I have some thoughts on closure. So again, like I, just for the sake of like my brain and organization, again, we're going to say this again, like none of this is linear. I mean, could go into like, sometimes I felt all of these things all at once. And so just moving into the making sense of it all, I definitely did ask why, and I did overanalyze the making sense in what you had just said about like navigating and trying to like find the path and like really bullet point certain things. I didn't need to do that. It was clear. Even though I couldn't see it in the moment, it was very clear. But this idea of closure in this past relationship and the one previous, which I would say have both been my two like most serious relationships. You're like, I've only had two like partners or two boyfriends, and I'm like, nah. But anyway, for me, closure, I'm not a fan. I feel like my expectations are so high, and in the moment, I feel and I think that maybe if I get closure, it might lead to me saying like, and we'll talk about this in a few other of the stages of like, it might lead to us figuring it out and having the conversation we've never had before, and all of a sudden they'll realize that we're actually made to be together and it'll fix everything. So I fucking hate closure because I never get what I need. And I've realized that the only closure I need is the closure in me and the closure that I need to give to myself and saying that this relationship is over. Because reaching out to them isn't gonna work. And in this sense, and in my own like, you know, in my past relationship, the closure came a little later, when we had just, you know, he did reach out and apologize for the way, like he broke up with me as his phone was dying and was like, yeah, I don't think we should be together. And I was talking and he was like, just to let you know, my phone is about to die. And I was like, what? His phone died. I did not hear back from him. And like in my mind, and I think I knew, I for some reason like didn't want to reach out or didn't want to like call back or whatever, because in my past relationship, like long ago in college, I felt like I reached out too much and it really did not help my healing process by constantly reaching out. So in this situation, and I also was fucking pissed. I was like, if you have something to say, you can fucking reach out to me. So I just didn't. And I was like, I just know I'm not gonna, because we've had this so many conversations about it beforehand that as soon as his phone died, I was like, that's it. And so this idea of closure, and I remember saying when you had asked, like, should I go meet up with him? I said no.
Yeah.
I was like, don't do it. And like, I understand what you know, and even in this article, guys, I forget who, forgive me, but I think it was an LCSW, licensed clinical social worker, who said like, I recommend reaching out to them and seeing if you can have a conversation. And I read that and I was like, I literally was like, okay, I'm like, shut the fuck up. Because I don't like it. I don't think it's helpful sometimes. I mean, maybe for you and your breakup, it might be. I'm not a fan of it. I think like if it is clear that especially if the wishy-washiness has been clear for a while, and I think in both of our instances it was, and so I had said like, don't do it. I don't think you're gonna get what you need, and I stand by that because I don't find it helpful for a lot of reasons, and like the expectations are so high, and I think like there's not a right time to get closure, and then by the time that you are in a mental state to be able to hear that person's thoughts, there's no fucking point. By that time you've already, you've gone through a lot of these stages, you're a little bit more into your routine a little bit, and you've kind of got a good head on your shoulders now, realizing that maybe you don't need that closure. And I think for me, as soon as someone breaks up with someone or I break up with someone, that closure feeling is so strong. And I think it's because of the euphoric recall of like all of these good things. And like, maybe if I just see them one more time or have this like one last conversation, and it never turns out the way that we think. And it almost leads you to, for you had to drive back home. It's almost like, in my mind, you went through all 13 of these stages on your drive home. You know what I mean? Yeah. And like, for me, it's just like, you're already like, let's just keep going, right? Let's just figure out how to get to the healing, like figure out what to do and how to help yourself. And in my personal opinion, I feel like this idea of closure or reaching out to your ex-partner, your former boo, is just is just not going to help you, and it's going to bring you all the way back up. And you're going to, all of the work and all of the thought process that you've already done is going to be wiped clean, and you're gonna have to start over. So I think like, I even circled it in my notes because I'm like, I just don't, this idea of closure, I'm not a fan. So I just wanted to say that.
Just a little
tidbit of mine. Clearly very strong opinion. But that moves into the fourth stage, which is numbness. And just this idea, and for me, numbness, when I think of numbness, I think of like not feeling. And I can say like, I did not feel. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So one thing in this article that really, the word that struck out to me the most was detachment. And that was strong. Just like detachment from myself and what makes me happy. Detachment from the people around me. Detachment from my routine. I am very much a person of routine, and that all fell apart, which led into, it's just like this snowball effect, right? And how this stage, numbness, can look so different in so many different people. So for me, it was like very much detachment, and how this idea of numbness is like, okay, I don't have time and I don't want to feel sad or mad or miss you or think about you. So let me detach and find other ways. I became very, very strict with myself. I became very the body dysmorphia at this time was insane. I feel like when someone says, not that he said he didn't love me, but when someone breaks up with you, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm unlovable, blah blah blah. I automatically associate that with the way that I look. And so I became very strict with myself on the way that I eat, the way that I work out, the way that I do all the things. And that was so unhealthy and did not help my process at all. So I think for this numbness stage, that's what it looked like for me.
It's interesting because I feel like the month after my most recent breakup, I did similar things, but I don't feel like it was an unhealthy thing. In fact, I feel like that month after, because I was like trying to piece it together, I like was taking care of myself because I just like that was the bare minimum that I could do for me. And I was actually like working out and trying to eat healthy and like starting to share what had happened with friends and family because I just like needed that support system. But then it was like once I got that quote unquote closure, it wasn't really closure. It was more just like the fucking conversation I deserved.
Yeah.
Then I went into numbness because I was like, oh, this is real. Like he really is done. We're done. And sorry, I'm all over the place. But why I think that month prior was good for me was because I wasn't doing those things in our relationship or in general because I was so invested in other people, him, the person I was just traveling with, my coworkers. Like I was giving all of that energy away that for once I was putting some of that energy into myself because I had nowhere else to put it and I had literally no energy. But then the numbness came. And that's when I turned a little bit to alcohol, which might not have been best, but like I was going out, I was having fun, but I was probably drinking a little bit more than I should have because I just like when the nights would come, I was like, I couldn't escape. As distracted as I was during the day, as busy as I stayed, you go lay in your bed and your mind's just like all over the place. And I was like going a million miles a minute. And so it's so hypocritical of me because of like things that actually happened in our relationship that I went to substance. And I don't think I became an alcoholic or anything, but it was more so just like probably
It's
overdoing
a real thing.
it.
Oh yeah, it's a real thing. And I think it's a coping mechanism, and what makes you feel good makes you feel good, and what makes you forget makes you forget. And recognizing it is important. Not that we recommend doing that, but it was part of our process. And I'm not that big of a drinker anyway, but I turned to some other things. It was my first Molly trip. And well, not my first, but yeah, I just like turned to a lot of things that I knew would make me feel good. And it can look different for everybody. And I think that, and this is one of the stages as well, is this is important to share how you're feeling with other people so that they can help you. A lot of the times, like, you are going to reach out to those substances or anything that makes you feel good. For me, it was like that strict of pushing my body, and I did take it a little too far. And of just, and I mean that, like, not that I like got super ripped, but I just mean like I literally had a schedule, and if anything messed with my schedule, it would send me fucking insane. Like if I'd have to like work out like either before or after work, whatever my schedule was. And if my sister or my aunt was like, hey, we're gonna go out to dinner around this time, like this is the plan for the family, yada yada, because I lived with them at the time, I became like a horrible, mean, angry person because I'm like, what the fuck? Like, this is my schedule. And also, I can't go out to eat there. You know what they serve. And I became a miserable person to be around because I became so strict with myself. So yeah, fun. Numbness, everybody.
It's a good stage.
Great stage. And then next is denial. Yeah. Denial is hard. For me, just this, like, what had struck out to me as far as like this article, because a lot of the things I agree with and some of the things I don't. What I did agree with is what they said is this idea of false hope and then loss of identity. Just tying it back to that numbness. Like, I really did feel like I was losing myself, so I need to find myself in other outlets and just losing who I was. And I think that's important too, because when you're with someone for 3 years, both of our relationships were 3 years, you are with that person, right? If you've decided to be in a relationship, or I've never been married, but I'm guessing that's what marriage is too. Like, you are fully with that person.
Mm-hmm.
And so you then lose, yeah, you've broken up with them, but in this stage of denial, you've realized, like, not only have you lost this person who was your best friend, your partner in crime, everything, yada, yada, the list goes on, you've lost a future that you've
Mm-hmm.
been dreaming of for the past 3 years. And the dreams and hopes that you guys had shared together, and the goals that you've talked about with this person, all of a sudden, like, get wiped. And that leads to this loss of identity, because you have, at least for me, I did throw myself into this person, and it ended. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing or
Mm-hmm.
what my future looks like, because I don't have you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's hard, and it's hard to talk about this, and I think it's important tying it back. Like, I'm going to say it so much it's going to be annoying. The shit is not linear.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been broke, like, the relationship has ended for almost 2 years, and sometimes, like, even looking back at these stages, I'm like, I sometimes feel like that now.
Mm-hmm.
And so don't I was very hard on myself even when we said we were talking about breakup, because I was like, people are going to think I'm crazy for still feeling these ways, even though it's been this long. And you're not crazy. It is normal. And if I have to be that person to tell you, then that's what I'm here for.
So for me, I think numbness and denial went hand in hand. And it's funny because I knew. It's like I just knew myself, and I was like, I need to delete his number. I need to, like, remove him from everything so I can't, like, try and reach out, which I guess, yeah, this goes hand in hand with maybe, like, bargaining or whatever. I don't think I was bargaining, but I was, like, in denial that it had ended, I guess. And because I was numbing myself, I reached out. I found a way. Drunk Erica finds a way. And I found a way to get in touch with him. And it's unfortunate because I don't remember any of the conversation. And from what he's told me, we talked about, I said a comment along the lines of, like, I don't know how you could have just, like, move on so quickly. So in my mind, that's, like, that denial of, like, that you could even do that. And I think what's interesting, maybe not interesting, but what's unique about the way our relationship ended compared to my previous relationship was that, like, there was still so much love there, and it just, like, wasn't working. Whereas, like, the previous relationship, it wasn't working. We did things to each other that just weren't good, and, like, we weren't compatible. Whereas I feel like with this last one, it was more like external things. So that's unfortunate. And I think that's where the denial came into play of, like, it could have worked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's all I have to say.
The next is anger. I can be a bit of an angry person sometimes. Don't laugh at that. So things that resonated with me were resentment, frustration, not only to them, but also yourself. And again, I keep saying these were all very strong, so I'm going to stop saying that, because I think that everything was really strong for me. Yeah, I was angry. Again, we were talking about it not being linear. That anger has been prominent throughout. And I think sometimes when I do kind of feel this, like, loss or sadness because of it, even now to this day, the thing that follows is anger, because I get frustrated for myself. Going back to the making sense of it all, and when you said, like, navigating your relationship, I think back to every little thing, and I get so angry.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's all I really have to say about it is, like, I think anger, I mean, it presents itself differently for everybody, and so recognizing yourself in the way that anger looks for you and how that might look in heartbreak or in a breakup. For me, it was just like, I literally sometimes, like, me as a person, just in general, like, when things really get to me, I just see red. And when I really sat down and tried to like process the relationship, I just saw red. Like I was
Mm.
so frustrated for a lot of different things. And then the way that I was broken up with, like I
Mm-hmm.
just could not get over it at the time because, again, like I didn't have that closure. But I was just like, why? Like, why would you do that? Like, are you?
Yeah.
I was just so angry. And so, and just the resentment to that person because I was, in my mind, I was like, if you could have just done what we had planned, we'd both be fucking happy.
Mm.
And now you couldn't because of your fucking wishy-washiness. Now we're both, well, I don't, in my, at the time, I thought, oh my God, he's like living his best life. I come to realize, like, you know, everybody is sad and, you know, he had to
Mm-hmm.
deal with the breakup as well. It was hard for him as well. But I was just like, and now I'm suffering from your fucking like I'm dealing with the consequences from your actions. And if you would have just done what I said, we would have been happy. So that's kind of the anger for me.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. It takes a lot for me to get really angry. I feel like it's not that I don't get angry because I
Hmm.
do. It's very internalized.
Mm.
And it's very much just like it quickly turns into I'm so frustrated and then I'm upset
Hmm.
and then I'm emotional. It's
Hmm.
not so much as like screaming fits, like, not that that's what it means, but but I feel like if I can think of anger is more of just like, well, fuck you then.
Hmm.
That was where my mind was at. Like, especially over the summer, it was like, well, whatever. I'm like having a good time and fuck you, you missed out.
Hmm.
So, like, try, like, not that that's healthy, but that was that stage in my mind. And that would come in and out of like, it's your loss.
Yeah.
Quoting Drake.
Amen, sister. Going into bargaining, a big thing is just like for me for bargaining was the what ifs. What if I
Mm.
didn't leave Australia? What if I liked the station that I worked on? What if I got another visa? What if I never went to Australia to begin with? What if I never had that, like the list goes on and on. And I thought
Mm-hmm.
about this again, like the what ifs happened all the time. And like even at the very beginning, like of the breakup, when he did break up with me and that phone call ended, like what if I didn't express my needs and say all of these things? Would I still have been broken up with? Like maybe
Mm.
things would have been better if I just like didn't say what I needed. Hindsight, not true, but the bargaining was true as far as like the what ifs. And then just kind of going back to that closure and what happens when you start to re-talk to that person. For me, when we ended up talking again, long time later, it was the idea of compromising past non-negotiables. So I had realized like what my worth is and what I need from a relationship. And then when you start to express that, you know, they don't like it, then you get broken up with, and then you want that closure, and then they reach out, and then you remember how beautiful they are and how great some things were, and how you shared memories, how you shared
Mm-hmm.
a fucking dog, all of these things. I start thinking in my mind, like, wait, maybe if I just like, maybe I don't need those boundaries. Maybe I don't. And that was strong for me. So I thought that
Mm.
was an important thing to recognize is that kind of happens in the bargaining stage as well, is when you start to maybe think like, do I need those boundaries? Do I need those when in fact like they're non-negotiables for a reason?
Mm-hmm. I think for me, the bargaining in my relationships has been more like bargaining future thinking, if
Mm.
that's even makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I reflect, 9 times out of 10, I already let them walk all over me and my boundaries. And I'm like, I already know that I gave them what I didn't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a what if of like, if I just did this instead. It's more of like, I'm an idiot. So, like, what if in the future they respect me? What if they've like changed or like actually want to put an effort or actually want to like fight for the relationship? Like, to me, it felt very one sided. And so the bargaining was more with myself in terms of moving on
Mm-hmm.
fully, of like, maybe they're going to change,
Yeah.
which is like, I already know people don't change or they do,
But
but
that's so
like,
strong.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that the what ifs is something that I do think about like when I am at my lowest, even now, because you can't help, like, even through everything, because so much time has passed on, I kind of like forget the shitty things, and I forget the boundaries that I created, obviously because I haven't been with that person. That I do, like, what if they reached out right now? What would I do? What if they decided to move here? What would I do? Um, Obviously, none of those things are going to happen. And obviously, like, you can't make a person change. So, but it's hard to realize that in the moment. I can realize that now when I have those, those thoughts that come into my head. But in the moment, it was really, really hard to kind of switch my brain. Um,
What's the next one?
Sadness.
Oh, my best friend.
Yeah. I don't know. There's not a lot to say on this. I think, again, I just want to kind of go back. I forget what episode we were talking about it, but for me, because I'm a visual person, this idea of like your feeling, whatever it is you're feeling, whether it's like sadness, whatever, is a square. And this big pressure ball is in the middle. Obviously, like at the very beginning of the relationship, the ball is really big and is touching all sides of the square, so you're really, really feeling it. As time goes on, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. The ball never goes away, and it's constantly bouncing around in this box, and every time it pings your side, you feel it. It's strong. It's strong even now. And that's one of the things that I was kind of unsure about to have this conversation, because I do feel embarrassed sometimes about how it has affected me and sometimes still affects me. But like I said, like, for a lot of reasons, it's important to share, and I'm wanting to share that now. But when it pings my box, it is hard.
Yeah.
It's so it's hard. And it brings back to what I was saying about the denial. It's just a reminder of how I lost that person and how I lost that future and how I lost those goals.
But you didn't lose that. That wasn't all on you.
I know.
I just want to clarify.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sadness for me, and I've been going to therapy for a minute, I don't allow myself to feel emotions sometimes. It's like, I gotta stay happy. I have a tinge of anger, a tinge of sadness. Pull it back, Erica. Life is good. But like, you need to allow that in and process it. And then because then you'll do dumb things like I've done. But like,
learn from us, people.
If you allow yourself to feel sad when the sadness comes up, and just like accepting that this emotion is here and that like you're just going to feel this way for right now, like, then it's so much easier to move through it. Whereas I feel like I push it as like far away as I can, and then it builds and builds and builds and builds. So then when I can't keep pushing it away, it's like so much sadness that it's overwhelming. And then I'm like, what? And then all those other thoughts come through,
Right.
that I think are hard to get through.
Yeah.
Okay.
Social media changes. So when I really, this was the best part about this article, because I never thought about it like this, but social media changes, and how, for me, the process of getting rid of all of those things on social media, and how I think how, yes, you're getting rid of all of those things on social media. And then in my mind, not that everybody is like looking on my Instagram, but for me, it was like, now everybody's gonna know. And that was like, I don't know why it was hard for me. I just didn't like that. This was hard too, because he was the first one to delete everything. And that was hard because I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. I didn't want to delete those things yet. And that's just a part of breaking up that I think everybody goes through now because of social media. And I mean, if you don't have social media, then you don't. But I mean, like, even now, like, I have photos saved on my phone, or had photos saved on my phone, or like on my drive, or in albums, or pictures of like that were framed. And like, what do you do with that? And like, how do you deal with what to do with those things? So I think that's like such an important thing to recognize when talking about breakups.
Comparing my two with the first, let's call him Bob.
Bob.
Because I can't.
Bob.
With Bob, he was the first one to delete everything. And it was like a little bit sad, but I kept him on mine for a while. Not because it was more so like I didn't want to, those memories happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to be like, oh, this never happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, it was like, this still happened.
Right.
And I still, like, that was a part of my life. I very rarely delete things on my Instagram, which is, like, my own thing. Because I'm like, that was a part of my life. That was, like, what has made me who I am today. So, with this last one, it was more of that sadness of, like, if I delete something, then it's, like, really over.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really, in my mind, I'm like, I'm never going to post another guy on my Instagram until we're fucking married because I don't want to deal with this anymore. But I think it was just that sadness of like, ooh, that's really ending, and removing them from my social media makes it permanent.
Mm-hmm. For me, this was one of the hardest ones because, and I still have a lot to like unpack with this, and I feel it a lot, is like we did such an incredible thing together. I had never left well, I had, but like I had never moved to another country. I did an incredible thing by moving to Australia and doing the things that I did, but I did it with this person. And so I felt like deleting all of these pictures was deleting this thing that I did in life. And sometimes, like, even now it's so strong, I feel like that is the coolest thing about, like, I say it to people now, it's become such a thing about me, is like, oh yeah, I lived in Australia, and everybody's like, oh my god, that's so cool, blah 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 blah, and it goes on, and like sometimes in my mind I'm like, is that the coolest thing I'm ever gonna do? Is that the greatest thing I'm ever gonna do? And like, no, it's not, but it's so strong sometimes. And it's even stronger when like I look back on pictures and like, yeah, there are of course pictures that I took without him in it. There are plenty of pictures, but it's like those are memories. That was an aspect of my life that was so great, and deleting that was just so hard.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to relapse.
Yeah.
This, for me personally, this goes hand in hand to closure. I feel like it's just not a good thing. I know it's a stage, but it's like this moment of relief only to do all of these stages all over again. And like, that's all. I do recommend that if you're broken up with, just move out of the country. It really helps the relapse process, because you can't really relapse. Yeah, so that's relapse for me.
Yeah. I think that for me, I haven't like relapsed with anyone in previous relationships, like physically, but I do think I've like reached out, and it's like, I don't know what I expect when I do that. Then I think about it and I'm like, why did we just talk?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what? I know what I was hoping for. I know what I was like wanting you to say, and you didn't say that. And why did I think that you would?
Mm-hmm.
It's just dumb.
Oh yeah.
So relapse is a stupid phase, and don't do it.
Yeah. Sometimes like it does happen, like when you do reach out and like you expect all of these things, but then like, yeah, the conversation ends, or it ends and you think like, oh, maybe we're going to start talking again, and then we never talk again, and then you have a girlfriend, and that's super cool. But it's just like, yeah, you go through this like what you think is going to be a moment of relief, only to do it these stages and feel this like breakup all over again. So yeah, not a fan of that stage. Next is acceptance. This word kind of trips me up, but what I really liked about it is like the no longer resisting that the breakup has happened. So like this denial and this feeling of like you're just kind of no longer resisting it. You're allowing yourself that space, and then also the possibility of seeing a little light at the end of this dark tunnel that you've been in for a little bit.
I think that when they move on with another person, and this is like how I feel, it makes it easier to accept.
Yep.
Because it's like there is no possibility, because you've moved on. And so I can like get that out of my head. And there's no me reaching out to you. There's no me doing any of these things because you're with someone else. Yep. And so
And
That's
I
it.
accept that you're with that other person and that you're trying to find your happiness. But it's a realization. It was a realization when I saw that he was in another relationship. Is like, okay, it's done. Like these what ifs and all of these things have ended. You're moving on. Now it's time for me too. So that just like idea of the light at the end of the tunnel, it's so hard to see that person with someone sometimes. And I think everybody relates. Like the first sting of like seeing that is like so hard, but like there is a breath of fresh air because you're like, oh my god, like I don't need to worry about you anymore. Like you're clearly taking care of yourself. It is now time for me to do the same. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost like you said, like it is beneficial. It may not feel like it when you're
In
looking
the
through
midst
their
of it.
Instagram, but it is. It really is. It's very important. Going into, oh yes, the comparison, or wow, yeah, the comparison dating phase. So you've decided, like, you see that light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe you're ready to start dating, or at least like putting yourself out there a little bit. But everybody, say you like see someone down the street, or you're talking to someone at the bar and they start talking to you. In your mind, you're like, you are not the person I was just with. And you're comparing, 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 comparing. This was true because I feel like everybody does this because your comfort, right? You're used to what you had. But what you had wasn't working. So realizing and recognizing, okay, what characteristics of my previous relationship did I like and what am I looking for? But also, and this is something that I've done, is going the complete like other side of the spectrum. Like I know what I like and what I don't like. And when I was first putting myself out there, I was like, I need to find someone that is not you at all. But I'm like, but there were things that I liked about you. Like
Mm-hmm.
there was a reason why we were together. And so like this is a really interesting like trying to navigate this phase as well as just like the dating scene in general of okay, your relationship is ended. So what do you like? What don't you look not like? And like how does that look when you're starting to enter the dating scene again?
Mm-hmm. I think for me, the comparison mostly comes into like when it gets to intimacy, because I do compare. I don't really compare as much in like personality, just because I'm like, I know you're a different person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not expecting you to be the same. But when it's like, and it goes back to that comfort thing, someone knowing you so well and then trying to be intimate with someone else who doesn't, it's just like, you're not the same. But I do want to touch on your point of like trying to convince yourself to go the 180 with someone else because I've shown you people.
I just sometimes you're like, hey, look at this person. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, you're gonna go what?
I know. I'm like trying to convince myself that maybe this is my type, and I know that it's not. It's just not.
Well,
So it's okay. You
do
like what
live
you
in
like.
yeah, you do live in California, so I feel like it's really hard to find like get away from that like surfer hippie kind of guy.
Mm.
But when you are with the surfer hippie kind of guy, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, this is not.
I think the same thing. I'm like, what am I doing? I
For
don't know.
me, it was the complete opposite. Like, I really did the 180 for like characteristics because there was so much about my ex's personality that I really like characteristics that I liked. It was not so much the intimacy part because I think the intimacy in my past relationship was a huge fail.
Mm-hmm.
And so that the intimacy part was fine, which I think makes it so much easier for me because that is really hard. Like when you are like really mesh with someone when it comes to like sex, there it's really hard to like try to find that when it's over. For
Mm-hmm.
me, I was like, I'm just glad I'm having sex now. So that's just great. But then trying to find like the characteristics that I liked and just learning a lot. I like this because you start to realize like you're learning a lot about yourself and what you like and what you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
Which moves into last phase, number 13, which is forward motion. And this is just realizing like it's a continued work. Also realizing it's nothing in life is linear, and
We should get that
especially
tatted.
yeah, seriously. And I'm ready for another tattoo too. So, but also just recognizing like it's hard. All of it's hard. And just because like you feel really shitty right now doesn't mean you're going to wake up tomorrow and feel on top of the world and ready to date and ready to get in that relationship, and then the next day it's hard again. And so that just like the fact that you're moving and you've recognized all of these things, that is forward motion, and that is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. I think that kind of segues into like coping and
Mm-hmm.
like good things that you can do to get that forward motion and to not feel stuck,
Mm-hmm.
because all those things we just talked about are like very valid. I mean, we tried to start with like literal scientific reason why you feel the things that you do.
Yeah.
But what are some things that you can do to have that forward motion? Some things that I was thinking of when we first broke up, I deleted social media. Was I off at 100%? Turns out you can still get on Instagram on your computer, but I was never on my phone. And like when I shut my computer, I wasn't on it, and I wasn't on it all the day on my computer. But like, I feel like that was one of the best things I could have done for myself right after the relationship ended, because I knew that I would have obsessively been like checking to see if like he was with someone else, if he was out doing things, if he was over it. And like, I was in so much pain. So I think giving yourself space from them, especially online, is really important. Luckily, we lived in different cities, so like there was space there too.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that space is a big one. And then taking time for yourself to like find yourself again,
Mm-hmm.
because odds are you don't really know who you are.
Yep.
Because you got lost in that relationship.
100%.
And I like think of the few things that I did was like skateboarding, and I like went to like a skate meetup, and I got another bike, and I started going to different workout classes and like staying active and finding those things again that I love to do.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like that was really helpful for me. Was it really hard to motivate myself to do them?
Mm-hmm.
Some days, yeah. But other days I was like, this is my one release of like how I can get my stress out. So it was really helpful.
For me personally, one thing I wrote down was understanding the past. So instead of hating it, instead of missing it, instead of X, Y, and Z, understanding it. And for me, because this relationship was literally goes hand in hand with my trip to Australia, I constantly have to remind myself that one, it was a great experience. The relationship may have been what it was, but in Australia, I did something great. And sometimes I have to remind myself of that. And also reminding myself that I did that then. That doesn't mean that's the coolest thing I've ever done or that I'm ever going to do. And like, there are going to be so many other opportunities, because I really do get so hung up on that. And that's like one thing that's made it hard to get over the relationship, because I associate cool travel Ellie with that relationship. And so if that relationship is over, I'm like, well, that person's gone. And so, yeah, the same thing that you said about like finding your identity and finding what I like. A good self-care routine, and realizing like I don't have to be so strict with my body, with myself, with my workout routine, but working out is something that's important and it makes me feel good. And what does that look like in a healthy aspect? And I think you can also relate to this next one is connection. I need to reach out to people. I need to talk to people. I need to open myself up and become vulnerable in order to have good connections. And I'm saying that, as you can see, as a reminder to myself, because it's so hard. And then I'm also going to mention before it leaves my mind is one thing that's helped me is like the strongest thing that I did, even like the day of the breakup and almost like every day or week, was like I really do like to journal. And sometimes I had mentioned this before. I really journal when things are really hard, and so sometimes I open my journal, it's all very like negative. But during this breakup and during these like couple of months and even over that year, what I had did is like in a tiny little journal, I had tried to write down at least 3 things that were great about my day, because what this breakup did is it really did pull me away from the connection I had with the people. And so like I was just felt so negative and so down, and it like I don't like doing that. I don't like pulling people down with me, and I felt that that's what I was doing. So just like recognizing like what were 3 best, I was looking at my journal before this episode, and I just flipped to like a random day, and the three things were me and my sisters belted out a song in the car. Like what? That lasted 2 to 5 minutes, but it was a highlight of my day. Like in that moment, I was not constantly thinking about you or the breakup. I was there having a moment with my sisters.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's so important too, is like, I had mentioned this at the beginning of the episode, is sometimes like when you get broken up with, or a breakup happens, you feel like your life has ended, but the world around you is still continuing. So like, how do you try to like jump back into this fast spinning world? And I think just recognizing like there are good aspects of the day. And if you can't remember them because it's hard, just write them down as the day goes on. Like I had this like little mini journal booklet that I carried around with me, because I knew at the end of the day, when the day is the hardest, I would forget all of those small little things. So I would even write them down in the moment, so that when I was alone at night with my thoughts and things were hard and I fucking hated everything, I could open it and be like, you sang this song with the girls today. And I was like, okay, center, recenter, everything's going to be okay. And so I think that was, at least for me, something that was really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's just some of the kind of mending yourself that I wanted to share.
Yeah. I just had like a few more quick ones.
Yeah.
I think the journal thing is great. You reminded me that I did something similar too, because it was like, you gotta write it down, otherwise you think your life's going to hell. The last thing I just want to say, aside from finding those connections, which is really important, and having that support system, is giving it time and recognizing that what you're feeling isn't going to last forever. There's this quote that I read in one of the articles when we were researching for this episode, and it said, it's better to not be in a relationship than be in an unhealthy one. You don't need a relationship to be happy.
One more time for the people in the back.
And I think that you can find so much happiness in a relationship and feel on top of the world, but you don't need a relationship to find that. And I found that like so many times this summer with you and with friends, and I'm gonna cry over that.
I'm going to. Oh, it's so true.
Because it's like, you really don't. And like, yeah, sure, it's great to have, and it's nice to have companionship, but like, you can find happiness in other places. And I'm in a way better place than I am now than I was, because I'm healthier now, and I'm not giving my energy into an unhealthy relationship that like, maybe, yeah, it could have worked in an alternate universe if we done things differently, if like he had stepped up.
Honestly.
But I am so much better off because of it. And even though he's the one that ended it, like, I've even said this to him. I'm like, ultimately, you made this decision because I wasn't going to.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes. Oh, yeah.
And I'm thankful that he did, because I know that I would have kept holding on and kept trying to make it work, and it wasn't working.
Forever.
Yeah.
I would have done it forever. I really would have. And now, because of it, I can wake up every day and choose me. And now I feel like I know what I'm looking for in a relationship. And I have all of this love to give. I need to try to remember to give it to myself. But also, like, I don't want to have to go through this again. And if you aren't filling my cup, then I need to learn not to fill yours, because that's life. And if it took all of this pain and heartbreak and emotional roller coaster to learn that, then I'm so grateful for it. And it's really hard to see it in the moment. And I know that if you are going through a breakup, or you're feeling like you're in that ambivalent stage of pro and cons, like, you just know, and it will get better.
Yeah, it'll get better.
I know. I did have one thing, like a fun little, because it's been a very deep episode. But I wanted to ask, like, what are some like songs that you listen to? Because I was trying to think, and like, it happened so long ago, I can't really remember. Like what songs I listen to, but I know that you're a music person. Like, you love your music.
I do.
So do you have any like recommendations or anything for people like out there of what you listen to that kind of
To like get over a breakup, or
both? Like, what were your like, because sometimes you need a cry. I read that in my article too. Sometimes you just need, oh, Luna's tail is going to come in the picture. Okay. Sometimes you do just need to let it out. So what were your like let out my life is over. I just need to cry songs. And then also you're like, okay, the baddest bitch on the planet and I'm going to get over you songs.
Well, since Spotify Rap just came out,
It's helpful.
I can literally tell you, I'm like, oh, that was at the beginning of the breakup. Oh, that was when my fuck you stage of the breakup.
Yes.
But the one that I listened to the most right after the breakup was Session 32 by Summer Walker. And it's basically, she's just like, you don't know what love is if you're not going to like stay up all night, if you're not going to like put in all this time. And she's basically like saying all these things you do when you like love someone and you want to fight for the relationship and you're like, you're choosing that person. And she's like, you don't know what love is if you're not willing to do that. And I listened to that song so many times, and it's literally less than 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. And it's like just this interlude song in her album. Maybe not even in her album. I don't know when it was released, but it's really good. And then my like Feeling Myself, there's quite a few, but the Meg Thee Stallion song, I think it's Her. Mm-hmm. And what was the other one? I think it's the one you showed me where she dang it. I really want to
The anxiety
remember.
One? Is it Her?
No. It's like it's a bad bitch song.
As we were talking about, because I knew if you started saying some would come up for me. For me, Janae Aiko's what is that album called? But like Triggered is on there. Is BS one of her songs? I can't remember the name of the song. Yeah, so like that album really was super helpful. At the time, I was listening to a lot of country music, so that's what like all those sad fucking country songs. That's what I was listening to. Is it coming up?
No, I don't know where it is, but Meg Thee Stallion's great. Bikini Bottom, that song that just came out by Ice Spice, so good.
I've heard of it.
I'll play it for you in the car after this.
Yes.
And then the other one that I wanted to say that's more like in your feels is 16 by Baby Keem. That song's really good. I have been putting together, if anyone wants to follow me on Spotify, I'm trying to be better about making playlists because
I recommend it because she knows her fucking music. I really
Even though I can't say any songs. I do like one of my favorite, okay, it's a quick tangent, but one of my favorite jobs I've ever had was teaching spin class. And it was my favorite job because of making the playlist. Like I would think about like, okay, when this song comes on, we're going to do this and then this is going to drop and then it's going to fade. And I was just like, this is going to be so awesome.
I told you what I think your dream job is. And I think
to be a DJ?
Yes. If you were the DJ in a club or at the bar, oh my, I would go off. Sometimes we go to like out and the music that they play, I'm just
so
like, what?
shit.
I'm like, you should just go up there. And they're like, no, go back. And I'm like, oh, you fucking suck at your job. Like, let someone else do it. Anyway.
Thank you. That's really honestly the highest compliment.
Yeah.
Anyway, breakups are hard. Find some good music. I have a boy bye playlist that's more of just like the fuck you music, but I'll put together some of the sad songs too, because you do need to listen to that to like get through.
Absolutely. Your stuff. It's very important. I think like music and for me like art, like journaling, writing, painting, all that kind of stuff is just like find your creative. Sometimes like if you're like a poem person, like I think a lot of artists say like the hardest point in your life is when like the greatest art is pulled out of you, so use it. But yeah, we just wanted to share this because of the time of the year, and really kind of be vulnerable with you guys. As always, please reach out if you guys have anything that you want to add, any of your stories or anything like that. You guys better be liking and subscribing and sharing us. We're talking like this now.
No, but for real,
but really,
podcasts only grow by word of mouth. That's the only way. So tell your friends.
Please.
Also, we want your feedback. We're gonna do a poll, I think, soon, because we want to know like better ways to structure, better ways to like keep everyone involved and like actually say things that aren't just like our random stories.
Yeah.
And we love you. Find us on Applied as Fuck everywhere.
Everywhere.
And see ya next week.
See you next week, guys. Love ya. Bye.